sup? I'm reliably informed that I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so here I am, pimping my stuff. You can buy most of that shit that I make over at post-mort.com. Hope to see you there. Hello lovelies, today we're going to be talking about Seclusium of Orphone, which is yet another Lamentations the Flame Princess book for review, because they're the next ones on my shelves that I haven't reviewed yet. Better get a few things out of the way. I think I got this for free. I'm not sure. This has happened with a number of the Lamentations books, and I never got around to reviewing them or reading them particularly up until recently. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that this is written by D Vincent Baker, who is a bit of a bougie, proggy lovey, and whose Apocalypse World I do not get on with at all. I also want to have a quick word with people at the end, particularly new people. Been an influx of recent subscribers, so I just want to have a little chat at the end. But let's talk about this, the Seclusium of Orphone. So it's a supplement for Lamentations the Flame Princess. Basically a way, a means, a style of going about creating the places in which wizards retreat to in order to do their magic, do their experimentation, brew their potions, have sex with their succubi, all of that kind of thing, right? It's a wizard's laboratory on a grander scale. So this is really a toolkit, a means by which to create dungeons belonging to mages, adventure locations belonging to mages. It's a process of creating that's what this is. If you're more familiar with storyteller games, it's analogous to a mage's chantry or Horizon Realm, or both put together. Now, like I said, I don't get on with Apocalypse World, and of the Lamentations products that I've reviewed or read recently, I think this is the second worst after England Upturned, which I really didn't like, but that's my own biases again. Partly that is due, I think, to Vincent Baker. Like I said, I don't like Apocalypse World at all. I don't find it useful. I find that the game takes place on a meta-narrative level, and in many ways that's also part of the problem with this. But I also think it's partially down to the presentation, the style of writing that Baker uses. So my objections are very personal, and they may not carry over to you, but it creates a rather negative impression of the book for me, in the same way that Apocalypse World does, because I found Dungeon World a much easier read. It made Apocalypse World much more appealing. Not appealing enough, but much more appealing. So I think part of my problem with this book and with Apocalypse World is just down to the way that D Vincent Baker goes about presenting things and doing things. I'll explain a bit further in a second. So what do we get in here? That it required an insert by Raji on how I would use this book is a little bit telling. And then it also has its own introduction and how to use this book. I mean, the presentation and the quality of the print is high, as all Lamentation stuff tends to be, though there's less illustrations. And I think overall, it's apart from the cover and the binding and the sort of immediate physical object presentation style, I do think it's a step below a lot of the other Lamentations work. The same can be said for England Upturned, again. But it's really just a process for creating these locations. So it takes you through step by step. Concepts of adventures, books of magic, expectations, grotesques and horrors, monsters and NPCs, other worlds, stages of a wizard's seclusium, which again is like the concept from Mage of the spring, summer, autumn, winter Chantry, the stages it goes through. Plasms, which are manifestations of magic, traps, treasures, wizards and magic users, wizards enclaves, and so on, right? So it briefly takes you through all of these ways to consider things, and then also goes through it more explicitly in terms of lists and inspirations. That's all somewhat useful. I don't find it useful because I think perhaps because I'm a very experienced games master and I would already consider a lot of these things and set out to make a place have a certain internal plausibility. But for people who are newer or who struggle with that sort of thing, I can see how that would be useful. But the lists are both rather limited and rather set, and then a big chunk of the book is also taken up with examples, when only a single example would have been enough, or examples as you go through the stages would have been enough. So you could cut out a big chunk of the book, which is these examples, because they're essentially redundant and they're not detailed enough to actually use as adventure locations without going into it more. And then at the end it just reiterates all these lists. So it's very set, and that's part of my problem with Apocalypse World as well, the whole idea of moves. And that design philosophy, that kind of set, kind of hedged in sort of way of doing things, comes through again in the writing here. So it's a set of inspirations, but it lacks that phantasmagorical sort of spirit quest, vision quest feeling you get reading through something by, say, Zach Smith. Whatever the opposite of a sweet spot is, this falls into it, between explicitly giving you information and data or giving you inspiration. So something hard and fast, like a standard adventure of the old school, the old thin adventure books that you used to get with the green, blue and orange covers, and the thin ones. That's very explicit. This is an adventure. This is what's in the locations. This is what's going on. This is what's gone on in the past. These are the tactics. That's one end. That's useful to a limited extent. And then on the other end of things, maybe you've got something like Zach Smith's presentations, which are, use words or numbers spelled out to draw streets, use this sort of scatter table to drop things onto. Here's some wild and wacky ideas here, there and everywhere dotted around, and you kind of get assaulted with ideas from all corners, right? That's the other end. This falls somewhere between, but not in the sweet spot, in the opposite of the sweet spot, the sour spot, I guess you could call it. So it's nicely bound, nicely presented, not to the extent that other Lamentations books are, at least once you get inside. It's somewhat unclear to the point where it needed additional explanation, and it's of rather limited use if you're an experienced games master. But a lot of this is down to me, my taste, my experience, my subjectivity. So you can take all that with a pinch of salt. There are useful ideas in there, but to my mind they're not presented in a particularly accessible or useful way, and there's a lot of wasted material, a lot of wasted space in the book that could have been used in better ways. Like one Seclusium properly detailed would have been better than 3 practically unusable ones. Scores then. Style. Usually I score Lamentations books pretty high for style. The cover's great. The physical quality of the book is great. The paper is perhaps a little thin in this one, but that's a kind of hallmark of Lamentations. They kind of go for that parchmenty style paper quite a lot. There aren't that many illustrations, and most of them aren't particularly up to the same standard, and there's quite a bit of repetition, so I would have to mark it down on that. And textual presentation is also part of style, and it's relatively inaccessible, but not horribly so. I can't give it more than a 4 for style on that basis. Normally I tend to give Lamentations books a 4 or 5 out of 5. 4, it's just barely a 4. If I'm being harsh, which I probably should be given the greater standard that Lamentations books are generally held to, I would drop it to a 3. But to my mind, the extra mile on the physical quality of the book is enough to bring it up to the 4, but just barely a 4. In terms of substance, not great, not hugely useful. Some of that is my bias though, so let's call it barely a 3 in terms of substance. So that gives it an overall score of 7 out of 10, though if I knock half a point off each of those, it's probably closer to 6 out of 10 or 3 out of 5. So average. Hey, so there's a lot of new people watching the channel, and a lot of them seem to have been brought in by the RPG reviews that I'm doing. This isn't an RPG review channel, this is a whatever I want channel, and I know that very much goes against what YouTube wants us to do. They want us to have separate channels for different topics, but I mix everything together. So I've got RPG reviews, book reviews, film reviews occasionally, me just sounding off about stuff, social commentary, politics, video games, the culture wars, censorship, just whatever takes my fancy and interest really. Now it all interrelates because it all relates to my inspirations and the things that influence my game design and so on, but I don't want anyone to be surprised or to feel let down or outraged when I'm not just spewing reviews of material, right? I just want to make sure we're all of an understanding there. I talk about all sorts of things here, so yeah, just be aware, but still subscribe, obviously. Zang. "Rrrr," said the grinder as it chewed its way through Alice, from the crown of her head all the way down to her toes. It ate the lot of her, unfussy, snout to tail, and cleared its plate. It gnashed its way through her dress, her pinafore, her shoes, and her unmentionables. It chewed her hair, devoured her scalp, gobbled up her arms, wolfed down her legs, gorged itself on her torso, noshed on her skin, and gulped her down without so much as a burp to show for it.